Today we're going to look at the Brown Shoes Only video scanner. A scanner circuit is a network of multipliers that takes some number of inputs, in this case 4, and maps them to the output based on a scan control voltage value. In the context of a video signal, we know that white corresponds with 1 volt and black corresponds with 0 volts. To get started with the scanner, we're going to put a low frequency oscillator into the scan so we can see what happens when we slowly fade from 0 volt to 1 volt over a longer amount of time. This low frequency operation will give us a good idea of what's going on behind the panel. Okay, we got our patch all set up. We have a low frequency oscillator. It's this old video waveform generator chugging away into the scan input. And we're going to see that we are slowly crossfading from input 1 down all the way through input 4 and then back up and then back down. So right now we have a horizontal scrolling bar. We just faded into that. Here we have an FM modulated prismatic ray. And we're going right back to, I think that this is input 2, our scrolling horizontal. Input 3 is a synced vertical. And input 4 is a staircase fed diver that I can scroll here if I want. But this low frequency operation shows, if we speed it up a little bit faster, we're just going to fade through the 4 inputs faster. But it's always going to do this pendulum style activity. We're going from 0 volts to 1 volt and back down to 0, back up to 1, back down to 0. Since it's going slow enough, we're only seeing 1 at a time. If I take my low frequency oscillator and just crank it up a little bit, we're going to start seeing a scrolling line at the CV input, which then means the scroll will contain all 4 inputs. So here we have a scrolling bar feeding our CV input. And we can see where we would typically have a black space, meaning the off part of my waveform, I'm actually seeing input 1. And at the brightest parts of the scrolling bar on the input, I'm seeing my input 4 being fed to the output. For the next patch, we're going to explore what it's like to use ramps as our scan input. Ramps are always very useful because they make a perfect gradient from one side of a screen to the other side. When we have this, we are able to map certain inputs with the scanner across that gradient. Remember, gradients, just as in an oscillator, are just going from 0 volts to 1 volt. In this case, we're going to take our 4 inputs and we're going to perfectly map them horizontally across the screen, left to right, in the same shape as this gradient. Now that I have my gradient plugged in, we see over where it was dark black on the left side of the screen, I have my FM oscillator. Next up, moving a little bit to the right on the screen, I have input 2. Input 2 is a scrolling oscillator down in this bottom case. We move further left to right, and we will see that we have input 3. Input 3 is coming from this prismatic ray. And finally, on the far right, the brightest portion of my ramp, I am seeing this diver, which is scrolling across that last segment. For the last segment of this introductory video, we want to just remind ourselves, of course, this is a video module, and all 5 of my inputs are video rate inputs. The more unlikely chosen path might be taking a camera and actually using a camera to scan my inputs. So here I have a camera sitting on my desk. There we go, that's me. And what we're going to do is take that input, and we are going to feed that into the scan. And we have the same 4 inputs rolling through. And now we can see that the darkest parts of that camera image are showing one of the oscillators, which is kind of hard to see because my room is really blown out right now. But if I cover up, oh, there's some dark stuff. That's my hand in the way. Pull my hand out of the way, and we're mostly seeing a blown out image. I probably should have tuned the camera up a little bit. Always tune your cameras up. But the brightest part of the screen, if we remember, was input 4. That's my diver, and we see my diver looking at the back side of my LZX vessel case, bright white, sitting in front of a window. So that's our introductory video on how the scanner works. I'm going to hopefully get a little bit better setup, some lights in here, and maybe we can do an advanced video talking about internal feedback patching with the scanner, really fun sensory translator, beat sync matching type patch, and then some memory palace usage where we can really kind of control the feedback, and we're going to rotate around kind of the RGB inputs of where the feedback's happening, and it kind of can always keep that feedback in check. That's a patch I've been working on more recently. Hope this worked out for you. Let me know in the comments.